Hey guys, I just need to rant about something for a minute. Um, this is something that's been bothering me for a lot. I don't know if everything that I mean to say is going to come out the way I want it to. I don't even know if I'm going to post this recording. I figured it's something that's been bothering me for a while, and then the conversation with one of my good friends from Renata, Connor, of course, Connor Fagan from Renata, basically tipped me over the edge into this rant, so to speak. And so I just want to get it out on recording. Let's see how it looks, how it comes out. If it says, if I end up saying what I want to say, and then I'll post it. Otherwise, no one will ever see this video. Anyways, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This conversation is going to be about balance to an extent. It is targeted for managed service providers, but it really is meant for any business that has to deal with like compliance, documentation, things like that. And so let me just jump right in. I am not a fan of documentation. I hate documenting. I hate looking up documentation. I hate trying to find the answers in documentation. In general, I'm not a fan of it, and I just want to talk about why. Like for me, documentation is necessary evil. The thing that drives me absolutely crazy is that we spend so much time putting effort and design and structure into this thing that the moment we save it, it becomes stale. There are so many things around documentation that people try to build things for. There's gamification, there's training plans, there's this thing where people are like, well, and certain MSPs, I see this where they say, well, if a ticket gets escalated, the reason why it got escalated should be documented, and how to fix it should be documented moving forward. We should make the lower level technician write the documentation alongside with the higher level technician so they can learn how to do whatever was done. We should make the higher level escalation engineer make the document, and then have the lower level engineer run through it and make sure it's good and it's not missing anything. Like, the thing that drives me absolutely crazy is the moment you hit save, that document becomes stale, and all that effort that you've put into creating that document and maintaining that document is now what could be considered tech debt. And so this is not really the conversation that I had with Connor. So if he's watching this, he's probably really confused right now. But the point is, like, there is a need for documentation. Like, I accept that. I know that. I've been in IT for a while. There have been situations where you do need to have something documented. But in my mind, anything that is something that is supposed to be a skill that the person already has. So, for example, like, our job as a technician is to come in and figure out what's going on. The client has a complaint, the customer has a problem, something's not working. Our job isn't to read a book and then like regurgitate the data. That's not what we're supposed to be doing. That is not a technician. Our job is to come in and figure out what's wrong. And so how is it that when it comes time for us to figure out things, our first and immediate response is, I'm sorry, I can't help you, it's not documented. One of the things that'll separate the tier 1 technician from the tier 2 technician, and this is a definition, I've been throwing it around here and there, it hasn't really been it's not really universally accepted. I don't think it's not a real standard definition of sorts. It's something that I hope to eventually make a global standard that everyone will follow. But as of right now, like, if you ask, what is a tier 1 technician, right? How do you answer that question? Well, someone who resets passwords. Really? So a password is basically the security gateway for someone running a multi-billion-dollar business or something like that, and you're going to trust that to a tier 1 technician. And when he makes the mistake, lets the wrong person in, or doesn't verify properly, who are you going to blame? Right? That's a tier 1 job? It's printer resets. Really? Are you sure about that? Because printer resets, for the most part, is not really a valid troubleshooting method. If printer's not working, there's usually a reason why, and we want to find that out instead of just resetting the printer every single time. Otherwise, that's how we end up with upset customers. It's how we end up with things not getting fixed. We're just doing a band-aid. We're not actually getting to the root cause of the problem. And so what exactly is a tier 1 technician? Because it's not the type of work being done. It isn't. And this is why I roll my eyes when someone's like, oh, I don't want to do these all day. They're not real They're not real issues. They're just tier 1 problem. I don't want to do that all day. Yeah, sometimes the person did forget the password, but the challenge is how do we help them not do that? What options can we provide to make it better? Sure, the printer not printing is annoying, but if you're the one who determines that the print driver is corrupt and that the reason why it fails to print every time is because the print driver causes the connection to fail when the spooler crashes or whatever, that's not a tier 1 thing, so what exactly, again, I'm going to ask, and if you have a better answer for this, by all means, leave it in the comments below. But in my mind, a tier 1 technician is someone who goes looking for the answer. Hey, Google. I shouldn't say that out loud. Hold on, let me stop my phones. I have this problem. How do I fix it? Or, hey, knowledge base, what can I find about this program? They go looking for the answer. And if they can't find it on Google, they can't find it in their knowledge base, you know what they do? Hey, tech lead, I have a problem I can't fix. That's what happens. And so the problem is that they're not actually fixing anything. They're just an encyclopedia. They're a reference guide. A tier 1 technician is essentially someone who collects the data and goes looking for an answer. I mean, this is why people are so concerned about AI replacing tier 1, because that's basically what they're doing, right? A tier 2 technician is someone who figures out the answer. They're no longer looking for the answer. They figure it out. Oh, I've never seen this before. Let's take a look. What happens if I press XYZ? How does this work? In security, there's something that security researchers have defined. The MITER ATT&CK framework is essentially the level, the steps required. Essentially, it's a process. It's a roadmap for hackers on how to get into any platform. What are the steps they're going to take to get into a platform? The MITER ATT&CK framework is basically an attack chain that defines how you get in, how initial access, how you persist access, how do you get higher levels of escalation, level of privileges, so on and so forth. This exists because in reality, there's a chain everywhere. Everything has an attack chain, so to speak. In order for a computer to start up, there is a process that gets followed where the BIOS or UEFI runs post tests and then hands off boot to the boot menu, and then the boot partition takes over, and so on and so forth, right? So no matter what, everything, essentially technology. I had a client one time. And we were talking about building out a process for their warehouse and doing some automation. And they're like, I don't want to build a warehouse on a house of cards. I'm like, what do you think technology is? It's literally a house of cards. We've got a billion circuits sending zeros and ones back and forth, or essentially billions of light switches that are flipping on and off that are randomly working together to come out and build this thing that we see presented to us on screen and that can handle input and data that we send back and forth. It's essentially a house of cards, right? If one thing goes wrong in that chain, the entire thing crumbles down. And so what's the difference, right? The house of cards is more visible to you, so therefore you're worried about it. It's essentially the same thing, right? Just because it's under one big brand name, if you have no idea how it works, you have no idea how it works. It doesn't make a difference. And so this is the attack chain that I'm talking about. When a tier 2 technician confronts a problem and something doesn't happen the way it's supposed to, or the way the user thinks it's supposed to, or something like that, our question isn't, hey, does anyone know this? Because who would? Why is that you're not a phone book? It's not your job. The question is, how is it supposed to behave? What are the steps that this program uses? What is the attack chain? What is the process that gets followed in order for this to be successful? Where is it falling apart? And how do we fix that? Or how can we work around this? And oftentimes it starts with the question, why? So going back to documentation, right? Having documentation is essential to an extent. There are things that you can't just figure out. It's very, very rare. Some people are going to say, well, it's more efficient if you don't have to figure it out. That's not true. Having the quick lookup may be more efficient in some cases, but also it's stale. It's not going to be correct, or at least if it is correct, it's a gamble. It's a chance. Something may have changed. You don't know what. So we document what should have been, potentially, so that we can go back and say, what happened here, what should have been done. We do that for compliance purposes, we do that for security purposes, for desired state configuration. Ideally, that's not really in documentation so much as in a system that's locked down and can't be changed, right? So Microsoft Intune enforces policies that has an audit trail of what's been going on, and so we know exactly what the desired state is supposed to be, and we have the ability to check what the desired state is actually what's currently configured or not. That's a whole different story. But again, for the most part, documenting things is a significant amount of time for us to end up at the document that may or may not be correct at the end, may or may not be useful in the end, and we try to build these things around it because our business mind, our business parts are telling us, like, we need to share the knowledge. We need to spread the love. We need to make sure that everyone can go around and do anything that any other technician can do. We want to make sure all the data is there. If they're a technician, I don't need to document what mail server they have. I should be able to know that. Not because I've been taught it, not because I know it from historical reasons, but because if I need to look up a mail server, I can do that. I'm a technician, and I can figure that out. And the thing is the more you practice a skill, the better you get at it. And so if I'm trying to juggle two different skills, one is look up documentation and become an encyclopedia or lookup tool, whatever, versus the other of figuring it out on the spot and becoming very agile, the more I do the lookups, the faster I get at them, the sharper my thinking becomes. And so as a technician, training, the sink or swim method really actually helps here in this case. So again, not really relevant to the conversation I was having with Connor, and he's probably very, very confused at this point. But this goes into the whole part that says, like, what data am I collecting at this point? How much effort am I going to put down the documentation? How useful is it to me? It dovetails into a conversation about ticket categorization. I had a client, it's like, hey, we want to work on our ticket categories, and I sighed really heavily and said, oh, no, you don't. You don't want to talk about that with me. Because it's the same concept. We have a problem here where we say, like, when we ask if we're collecting data or if we're doing a specific process, right? The question I always come back with is why? What is the intention behind it? What is it that we're trying to do? Now, data in and of itself is a valuable entity, right? So in my opinion, if we have that data and we can collect it easily, then we want to do it. But the moment we start investing effort to make that happen, the question we ask is, why are we doing it? So documentation, I am a Hoodoo hosting provider. If you don't know that, I am a Hoodoo hosting provider. I'm a Hoodoo reseller. I am very close friends with Hoodoo, Jacob and his team. And I like the platform for a documentation platform. And I think that there are a lot of uses for it. How to follow a specific process is important to have documented because that's not something that you can just figure out. In some cases, people will be like, well, it's common sense, if you're making a new user, you should look up a similar user and find out what groups they're in. That's common sense. No, not necessarily. Sure, we can probably guess that specific scenario as common sense, but that might not even be the right thing to do, potentially. Right? And without knowing to say, like, hey, maybe you should have templates, disabled users as templates to copy in specific roles. And by the way, if you're not doing that, you should be, potentially. But maybe that's not common sense, right? And so it might be common sense for someone who's been doing a certain thing a specific way over and over again for so long, but it's not common sense out of the box. It's something you don't think about. So it's a good idea to throw it out there, right? And then you start following it, it becomes common sense. But in terms of just knowing it, like, that's something that can be documented. Whereas the steps to complete configuration inside of a tool, how do we set up conditional access policy, like, that doesn't need to be documented. Because again, how often does Microsoft 365, how often does that interface change? In fact, the name's not even Microsoft 365 anymore, or Microsoft Azure, Azure AD. It doesn't exist. It's now Entra. And so now all of your documentation that references Microsoft Azure is out of date and wrong. And now you should go back and fix it all, or not, or just throw it out and forget that you ever had it documented. Because the steps to complete something technically and the things that happen should not be in your documentation. That should be something you reference either the vendor documentation, or as a technician, you just go figure it out, right? Like, there is a certain level of figure it out that needs to be done here. Some of this stuff can be through training, where you go through training on the actual tool, so you learn how to use it. And then other stuff is something that it's not a script that you follow like a trained monkey. So with that being said, some of the stuff that we document can be documented automatically. And this is where automated documentation comes in. There you go. Right? Like CIPP just made an announcement that they've integrated with, they were already integrated with Ninja, and they've expanded that integration to Hoodoo to allow for automatic documentation of their Microsoft 365 environments. That's cool, right? I can spend almost zero effort setting up, and suddenly I have all of my data in one place. It's not worth doing it manually. I am not going to go around and start logging all of my users into Hoodoo and what licenses they have and what rights they were assigned and things like that. I'm not going to do that manually. But if I have the option to click a button and have it done for me, I'm going to do it, right? So we start from the premise as the data is useful to have, right? Or at least we want the data there. Now we ask the question why, and how much effort does it take to get it there? And we use those answers to figure out should we be doing it or not. So the conversation I had with Connor came around regarding time tracking, where we were just talking about what types of time we would track in the system or not track in the system. And basically, I have the same mindset to when it comes to tracking time. Whether or not this is time that's billable to the customer, or whether or not it's time that's not billable to the customer, whether or not it's time, if it is time that a technician or you within your business are spending on the business, we want to know, we as in the business should want to know that time. Now the question as to why you want to know that time is not really relevant right now. What is relevant is that the amount of effort to track that time is minimal. We already have a process in place that says you should be tracking your time. It's something you should be very used to doing, and it should not take you more than a few minutes, 5 at the most, to perform. And so if you spend 4 hours doing something, investing 5 minutes to record that you spent 4 hours doing something, or even investing 5 minutes to record that you spent half an hour doing something, is absolutely worth it, even if you don't know why yet. We may not have a report that's going to make it useful immediately, but in the future, having that data is something that you can use to figure out potentially anything. Like the whole point is we don't know necessarily right now why you would need it, but since the level of effort to collect that data is so small, we still want it because data in and of itself is good to have. We follow the adage of knowledge is power. Splitting that off into the conversation about ticket categorization, because I did touch on it very briefly. The problem that we have with categorization, again, we can have the same, like my opinion, is that ticket categories are basically not helpful in and of itself. And so therefore, when we start building out our categories, we should make sure we're doing it very intentionally. Why do we have it? Why do we need it? Should we even be tracking it? Obviously, data is good, and having data is great. What is the level of effort that's going to go into, and why do we want to have that data, right? That's going to be what comes into place. The why becomes important because the level of effort we're talking about is not necessarily in tracking that data, it's in building out what those categories can be. In order for categories to be useful, they are free-form text, essentially. The only way that they're useful is that you have a pre-built list that a technician can choose from to say this ticket is this category. Because then we can aggregate. If you just allow free-form text without any kind of preset list, you can't do anything with that data except for maybe feed it to AI and have them generate it, which is actually not a bad thing now that I say that out loud. In today's day and age, categorization of tickets may completely change. We could just ask the technician for a text field to say, enter the category of the ticket, let them specify something, and have AI aggregate that for us, because then it can use a large language model to make that happen properly. But up until then, without that, we don't have a way of doing that. So the technician has to choose from a preset list. And now the level of effort is not on the collecting of the data, it's on building out those categories. The amount of time people spend on figuring out every type of issue that a ticket could fall into to make sure that those categories are created is insane. I've seen it. And then not only that, but they build out this list, but they don't realize, because they get stuck in this cognitive bias where they're seeing everything in a specific narrow tunnel. They start building out a list where certain categories directly overlap with other categories. Now, if I were to walk away for a second, clear my mind, come back and say, I'm going to work on this ticket. I'm going to create a new ticket. I have a problem with network performance or internet going down or something like that, Wi-Fi not working, and I come into my ticket and I hit new ticket and I start collecting information. I go to the issue and I pick what? Networking, performance, which one? Because it could fall under either or. Well, let's say it's the Wi-Fi down. Let's say it's not performance, it's networking. I go to networking and I pick what? Internet down, Wi-Fi down. Is it computer down? Is it only one person? Like I don't really know. And now as a technician, I'm really confused. And the moment you make a technician confused, you know what they do? Especially if it's not related to the job that they're supposed to be doing, they stop thinking. I'm just going to pick the first one that makes sense to me. And so day one, I walk in, I take the Wi-Fi down problem, and I log it as network internet down. Boom. 5 minutes later, I get the exact same problem on another ticket, and I'm logging it as network Wi-Fi down. And another minute later, I'm doing the exact same problem, and I'm logging it as something completely different because I am picking what makes the most sense to me in the moment, and that's completely based off of what options are presented to me on the screen that I can see. I am not spending time to go looking for it, which means that what I'm describing is collecting essentially useless data because now the same exact thing that we were supposed to be correlating with is now logged 3 different ways. The data is not the same, and nothing makes any sense anymore. So that means our report that we would build out to say, here are the list of issues by type, yeah, it looks pretty, but it's also pointless and wrong. And so what exactly are we presenting to the clients if the client comes back and says, we want a list of our issues broken down by blah, blah, blah? No, you don't. Trust me, you don't. It's not accurate. The amount of time we're going to spend collecting is going to throw us off. The amount of time we're going to spend stressing over making sure that works is going to throw us off, and it's just not worth it. Like, there's nothing you're doing with that data. We can collect other data in other ways that are more useful to us. For example, the resolution category. Way more helpful than the ticket category up front before the ticket's even worked on. The resolution category will tell us, was it a user problem? Was there a change done to the system that wasn't authorized? Was there training that had to be involved? And so on and so forth. And we do that at the end of the ticket, which means that we already know what happened. We have the full story. We can pick the accurate category, and we don't have to worry about overlap because we're picking a very specific category based off how the problem was solved. And that we can report on. So we can take the tickets and we can say how many tickets was user A assigned or created that required user training. Let's go take a look at those. How many tickets were created for this asset where there was a hardware problem? Let's go take a look at that. Right? And so that is a more intentional way to collect data. And that's the spiel about ticket categorization. It's kind of the same thing. It talks about, like, again, data is important, and we always want to have data. Knowledge is power. I'm always behind that. We will collect whatever data we can, and we will hold it. You know, nobody from a compliance standpoint come after me. I understand there's compliance repercussions there with DLP and stuff like that. Bottom line is that data is so valuable, and we can't even envision all the different possible ways that we can use it. So if we have an opportunity to collect data with a little or small amount of effort, then we should absolutely collect it. Going back to ticket categories one more time, right? Just because I just said all that thing does not mean I'm not going to help you build a categories list. In fact, what I would do is go to ChatGPT and have it generate a list of categories that I would just throw into the system. Or pull your existing categories in, or create a system where technicians can suggest their own categories and build a system off of that. We're not looking to throw the whole category section out because data is always helpful. We're looking to build a list that's intentional, a list that doesn't take a lot of time to build, and worst case scenario, we have it. We can do something with it, potentially, maybe, if there's something useful that we want to do with it. And so data is always good to have. But how we collect that data is very important. Are we spending a lot of time doing it? Is that data even accurate? That's another important thing. And what can we use that data for? When it comes to time tracking, that's super easy. Time tracking is very, very much black and white. How much time did you spend? What were you doing? Was it chargeable? Yes or no? And so we want to be able to say in the future, potentially, that I spent 12 hours this past year doing non-billable work. You know, it's probably a lot more than that. It actually is a lot more than that. But we want to be able to say exactly how much time you spent doing non-billable work. And we want to be able to say how much time you spent doing billable work. And we want to be able to say how much time we spent doing work that we donated away that would have been billable. And what areas did we work on at that point? So that we can say, you know what? I did a lot of things this year, and I don't know if I need to brush up on a specific topic. I wonder what took me the longest to work on. Oh, look, I can really brush up on AI stuff, for example, right? So having that kind of visibility, even if you can't envision it right now, I just gave out some examples. They may not apply to you. They may apply to you. We don't know. But they're just some examples. Even if you don't have the vision of how that data is useful right now, it's something that you should absolutely be collecting. And so the thing that we want to consider, the attack chain of sorts that exists in terms of should we be collecting this data or should we follow this process? when it comes to data collection is data helpful? The answer is yes. It always is helpful. Okay. If it's helpful, next question is how much effort is it going to take to collect that data? And how much should we expend to collect that data? Right? Once we know that we want it, the question becomes, how much time is it going to take for us? Well, what does it cost us? What's the expense of doing this? And then we can take that expense and measure it against the benefit we get out of it. Now, if we don't see a benefit right now, then the expense right now isn't worth it, right? But that doesn't mean we just don't collect it at all. It just means we do little effort, unless it really is impossible to collect, like in certain types of documentation, that's impossible to collect without a significant expense. At that point, don't do it, right? But if the data is able to be collected easily without a significant expense, then having that data right now allows you to start building, especially if it's accurate data, historical record that you can go back to and do crazy things with, which you've never been able to envision before. Like ChatGPT, for example, is trained on historical data. Loads and loads of crap data that existed on the internet that it was trained on, right? And that's what it was able to basically build statistical answers off of because of an insane amount of history that it has. That's the whole way LLMs work. Anyways, that's my rant. Hopefully, this was helpful to you and interesting, and I think that if you can see this, you know the answer that I decided to post it, and we'll talk to you on the next video. Have a great night.